halfway through the course. And now I understand what's going on. So, my understanding is that Friday we should determine the grades, and we said we would give grades based on the 2 out of the 3, obviously the first 2, and not on the presentation you made, but on the revised version of it. So in a little while I looked at the presentations, and I thought maybe this afternoon while you're working on your presentations for tomorrow, I can meet individually with each group and we can just go over some of the points, right? The other thing is, will you be ready to make your presentation tomorrow morning rather than afternoon? Because then I can give comments in the afternoon so that you have time to revise on Thursday, right? Thursday is going to be the day when you can finalize your both of your presentations. And so also in light of that, I'm going to keep shuffle the proportion of teaching versus working in groups a little bit, so that it's Friday and Saturday are more teaching heavy and less time for to work, so that today, tomorrow and the day after you have a little more time to finalize and polish your presentations. Does that sound reasonable, workable? I'm also willing to entertain questions that you think haven't been addressed so far and doesn't look like they may get addressed. For example, Priyanka raised the point that we've been talking about WH movement and the semantics built on WH movement, which seems plausible for English, but is it necessarily what we want for, maybe I'm changing a little bit what you said, but are there other ways? And of course there are other ways of interpreting questions, even in English, which I don't mind discussing at least to some extent to give you an idea of what those other alternative methods are. But that I think we can wait till, let's say, Saturday, because nothing in what you're doing between, for your presentations really rests crucially on that. So, but if there's any other such things that you think I would really want to understand what this is, or, and if it is something that I think I can work on, that I can manage to explain or present in a short while, I'll do that. Yes, Gargi.
For example, when we were saying in Hindi, it may, it's not really distraction.
Oh, that we will, yes, that we are actually, that's part of my plan. Because when I looked at, I actually knew that this issue would come up, but that one for pedagogical reasons, I did not particularly present because I wanted to see what you would come up with. But I will discuss that maybe even later today. So that's one thing. The other thing, so you don't have to tell me right now. You can send me email today, tomorrow, but do it by tomorrow so that I can see if I can fit it in. If I can't fit it in, I'll give you references to what you can look at, okay? The second thing is this WH the hell that I threw in at the last minute, and then I thought, oh my God, what have I done? I've unleashed this monster. So, I hadn't read this paper by Dendikan and Gianna Kudu. I knew of it, but if you feel, basically what I wondered was if there was a quick equivalent. And people were giving me some equivalents that it captured some of the emotive aspect of what the hell are you doing, but maybe not quite. But this paper has some, if you look at this paper, you will see how to determine whether the construction you're looking at is really a WH the hell construction. It's an LI paper. Do people have access to LI papers? Yeah? Okay. So if you can't go through LI for this, you can also look at Anastasia Giannakidu's, you know the name? Her website has this paper Anastasia. So this paper is on her website, you can look at it. If you want to work on WH the Hell, the other thing is, it's not necessary that every language has everything, right? But it's good to know what this thing would be. I don't know the analysis, but here's one diagnostic. Something like this is in the paper. I don't know if, like this. Something like this is in the paper. So, but it should ring bells with what we were looking at yesterday with McCluskey's inversion cases. So, what is inversion in standard English, the one that we know of? It's a main clause phenomenon, right? To form questions, direct questions, we have inversion. When you have the canonical subordinated questions, you don't have inversion, right? You say, I know whether she left. You don't say, I know whether did she leave, etc. And this is true also for in German it's V2. The verb comes second in main clauses but not in embedded clauses. And yet there's a class of embedded clauses where you see root phenomena. And this reminded me of that. Again, I'm not sure that's how they present it, so you'll have to read and see whether what I'm saying is consistent with what they're saying, or whether they've already said it and I'm repeating it. But so make sure, if you ever work on this, to get the citations right. If it's what they're saying, then you should attribute it to them, obviously. So one of the things that data dimension is, you can say, I know what the hell she did. You can't say, I know what the hell she did. Or it's bad, or something like that. Does it sound good to everybody? There's something odd about it, right? In a way that I don't know what the hell she did. Sounds better. And I think, do you know what the hell she did? If that sounds better, then we're not talking. I haven't spent time thinking about this too deeply, but look at the paper and make sure, if you're going to work on WH the hell, there may be other diagnostics there. But I do think, I wonder what the hell she did sounds definitely better. Any questions? So the order for the next 3 days is, tomorrow morning you'll make your presentations on delinking, so that tomorrow afternoon I can spend some time with you giving feedback, and then you will get feedback on the first presentation today afternoon. So Thursday you can, we'll see where we are tomorrow, and then you can decide whether I give any lecture at all on Thursday, or whether you need time to work on it, and what Avinash and Renuka tell me I need to do. But make sure by Friday morning you have it done, right? The first two presentations. And then I'll present the work on Polarkia, which a lot of you already know some of. But, it might be still good to discuss it as a class. In a way, it's too bad, because I know there's a lot of new stuff on this kind of Polarkia kind of thing, and I know about Marathi, maybe in other languages too. On the other hand, I feel that work is already out there enough that you could do it on your own too. Whereas this delinking is not something we've looked at all for South Asian languages. So at least we'll have some kind of base to, maybe it will come to nothing, but at least you'll have something. If someone asks you, do you have delinking phenomena in language X from South Asia? You will say, well, it's like this. But the funny thing is, it's not only in the language we are saying, but in at least 3 other languages that we looked at in this context, okay? So, any questions on the logistics? Yes. Mm-hmm.
If anybody says that, do you know what the hell she did? So I can answer, I know what the hell she did.
Yeah. And why is that a problem?
Because I said I wrote the underlying.
Oh, you're saying the answer, I know what the hell. So, yeah, that's a good point. Can you say I know what the hell she did? Okay, so what you're raising is a very valid point, but it plays out in another. So this would actually add to the idea that it's a polarity item. So if I ask you, did you eat anything this morning? That's a good question, right? How will you answer? Yes? Not I did. Full sentence. Yes?
I ate something in the morning.
You can't say yes, I ate anything. Right? So if it's a polarity item, which is what I expect they are saying, then polarity items are good in questions, but in the corresponding answer you have to switch from the polarity item to the regular item. So that's what we did with, that's the one I know better. So it's, in a way we copy the question nucleus, but we copy something that's not exactly word for word. Similarly, if I say, do you know the answer? You don't answer, yes, you know the answer. You say, yes, I know the answer, right? So things that are either indexicals, you give the corresponding. So the proposition doesn't use I and you, right? The proposition uses Swarali knows the answer, Swarali doesn't know the answer. And if Swarali herself is going to give the answer, then she'll use the expression that best matches the meaning the individual Swarali, which in her case would be I. In my case, it would be you, right? If I'm addressing it to you. So similarly, you're right that this is a problem if you copy exactly. So the idea would be that what the hell kind of a item, like other polarity items, that is the exact syntactic form that or morphological form you use is dependent on the structure in which it occurs. But it means something, that meaning gets transferred. So, yes.
In general, when we ask the question, do you know what someone did?
Mm-hmm.
There are two readings that I get. One where I know what the person did and I'm checking if you know, and then I'll give you the answer. And the other one is just a direct question where I want to, like, I'm seeking information.
Mm-hmm.
So in D, the first reading gets blocked for me where, like, I'm genuinely just asking for information. I'm not checking whether you know and seeking to fill you in.
Yeah. So good point. Will segue directly into what we are going to discuss. Technically, it's embedded. You're not seeking information. Technically, right? It's just a declarative. It's simply stating, I know or I don't know what the answer to this question is. But pragmatically, very often, if I say I don't know something, you mean B, I know what the hell, or D, do you know? Yeah, but same thing. Sometimes with this or with this, you answer the technical answer to this is yes, I know. No, I don't know. But in reality, very often we wonder why this question, forget the hell part, but why are you telling me what you know and you don't know why are you asking me whether I know? Maybe you're interested in the question itself. So this ties in with what we discussed a little bit in relation to scope marking, that Q2 was the main point, right? And we'll see, in fact, that's one of the cases that we'll be discussing today. What McCloskey presented, if you remember, was this kind of a paradigm, right? Where no, it wasn't about what the hell, but it was about inversion, which is why I said root phenomenon. But maybe, it's a polarity. I don't really know. I haven't studied it from this perspective in detail. But you can teach me with your presentations what it is. So I'm going to leave this till tomorrow morning. You can, again, I'm not pushing everybody has to do WH the hell. You might think about it. But it does respond to what we were discussing yesterday in terms of what diagnostics would be used to decide whether something that has an expressive feel to it, it's like, which idiot did this, right? And you can have some other words in there that might force that kind of reading where I don't like this or I think it's really stupid or whatever. Those are like expressive expressions, but then you have to decide whether it's really a case of what is called aggressive non-delinking or not. But, we're just looking for a way of thinking about the different kinds of WH phrases in these languages. Like I said, I'm not at all sure that this has been done. Oh, one other example that I think is worth looking at, which also I did not push. I said how many, but you can also, this is something that shows, so remember I said for Pesetsky, there's a class of noun phrases that are inherently delinked, which and. Then there's a class that's aggressively non-delinked, which is the hell. In between is the class that's not inherently delinked but can get delinked. And within that class, there seems to be 3 layers at least. One is who and what that very easily get queued to a given familiar set of entities. Where and what also seem to allow. But then how, why, how many, they tend to be a little more problematic. And here's one example that is generally given to show that this is hard. How is hard. I presented how many, but how. So you can say, how did you fix the car? And what will you answer? For example, how did you fix the car? By calling the mechanic or doing it myself or using a nut and bolt or tightening, whatever. So it will be manners in which the car got fixed. What about this sentence or this question? How didn't you fix the car? Does that sound good? She laughs. What would it mean? So this is a negative island effect, right? Because there's a negation. How did you not fix the car? And now you're saying, suppose you had 3 potential ways of fixing. The answer you should get, if this was acceptable, then let's say there are 3 ways of fixing the car: calling the mechanic, doing it yourself, doing it yourself, and asking a friend. Let's keep them minimally similar. How did you fix the car? There's one out of those 3 that you will name, the one that was true. In this case, what you should answer, the presupposition is there's one that is true. I did not fix it by myself. The other true are false, right? I want 3 in there. So it means that I fixed it by calling my friend. I didn't fix it by calling my friend is false. I didn't fix it by, what was the other one? Calling the mechanic is false. The only one that is true is I didn't fix it myself, right? But that's not the meaning we get, right? It's, if you say I didn't fix it myself, it doesn't mean you fixed it by calling the mechanic and calling your friend. So this sentence is problematic, and this tells you how hard it is. I think this makes it clearer. So remember, they are all negative sentences. Only one of them is true, right? The other 2 are false, which means that the positive counterparts are both true. And that's not what the meaning that we intuitively get. Or that explains what's wrong with this sentence, with this question. So this is an example simply of showing why negation is a weak island that is harder with how. You don't really, how didn't you fix the car, doesn't quite work the way we expect. Who didn't you invite is easier to, because you can say, I didn't invite John. I invited Mary and I invited Sue. Those are the 2. So I didn't invite Mary is false, i.e. I invited her. I didn't invite Sue is false, therefore I invited Sue. But that's easy to think about as inviting a multiple set of people and not inviting one person. So the delinking in this case, I suppose you could make it work, but it's much harder because that means you fixed it in 2 ways and not in a 3rd way. That's sort of where it's going. Okay? Shall we move on to the business of the day? Can I raise this? Yes.
How haven't you fixed the car?
How haven't you fixed the car? And what's your, what's the, I think you're saying that because you think it's good.
Yes.
And what does it mean? What will be the answer?
You were expecting that you must have fixed the car by now.
Yeah. So that,
You're saying how come?
how come? So it's a matrix, right? So that's an important thing, because of course we have intuitions, it's grammatical and we can give an answer. It's almost like asking why, right? And the why is about, you didn't fix the car, why was it? This one is saying you fixed the car, but not in one particular way, you fixed it in other ways. So that's sort of, yeah, good, thank you, good point. So it's kind of a little bit tricky, but that's what we are here for. Yes, Srikar?
But if we had only two options, would it be okay then? Or
No, the thing is that it still is asking for something that, so if you had two options and it was clear, you would create a delinked context. So remember, these weak islands, this is Pisetsky's point, right? Like if I say, okay, there were two ways in which you could solve this problem. Yourself or by asking a friend. How did you not solve the problem? I don't know, I'm still finding it hard, but the point would be exactly that. I think with two, with delinking, it works. Maybe even with three, if you set up the context in the right way to say, you have to do it in every way but one. So even the existential presupposition has to match, right? That there is one and exactly one way in which you didn't or you did phi, right? So a lot of things have to be controlled. I think Pisetsky's point here would be that how much controlling you need in order to make it work, however much you need, it's not the case with when you have a full delinked phrase. There somehow it comes for free, or that's his general point. But you can play with this and see how far you can go with it. Okay. Did he bring the thing? Oh, I thought he brought the handouts for. Okay, we'll wait. What time is it? 10. Okay, so here's what we'll do. I just will quickly review and see if you have any questions on. I'm looking at this very short handout that had embedding speech act phrases. And just to refresh our memory, this is the paradigm in 1 to 3 is from McCloskey's paper on Irish, a dialect of English. So yesterday, I think when I presented it, it was towards the end, so I didn't really take questions and objections or whatever. So what's not at issue is that 1A, 1B is good, right? That's the basic way of saying, subordinating, that's how subordinated questions behave, indirect questions. Sue wonders whether Mary left, Sue knows whether Mary left, right? That's fine. Does everyone agree with 2A, 2B? Either absolute, yes, we get 2A, we don't get 2B, or relative? Any thoughts, Praveen?
2A for me is problematic.
Problematic. Anyone else who feels the way Praveen does? Okay, so 1, 2, 3, slowly. Anyone else? Same, everybody same. Okay, how many of you are literature wannabes, literature aficionados? Let's see if I can pull up this paper quickly, and I'll read you a few more. again, my goal is not to, not to say your intuitions are wrong, because that's not what we do in linguistics, right? But to see if your intuitions are based, sometimes we have to sharpen our listening part of our intuition a little bit. So that's my goal. Because here's the other thing, even if it's not true for standard English, it's only true for the dialect of English that he's talking about, it still is a fact about natural language, right? And it's worth looking at. Yes, Praveen.
Then in that case, 1B, which seemed okay to Pratik,
Uh-huh.
that was I know what the hell she did, is odd for me, but I would then buy whatever.
No, I didn't say a person. I mean, although,
I mean,
yeah.
and what I'm saying is that if it seems and he believes that it is okay,
It wasn't actually okay for him. He was questioning me in a very polite way. I think it was not okay for him. No, is that right? His point was, if we ask the question, do you know what the hell she did?
I can say I know what the hell she did.
But I thought you didn't like it. Or you said you like it and I put asterisk. Okay. Yes, and your point is?
There would be an entire community of such speakers who might
Yeah.
share his intuitions.
This is true. I actually, okay, so the first thing is that I'm not, I looked this up in 10 minutes, but I think that data is correct, so you should also double check. But this is what we have to do in linguistics, right? To decide whether grammaticality, some paradigm, is it just random or is it systematic, right? Once we decide that it is, and it's a judgment call, right? Because in a way, I don't think that there's a rule that says X percentage have to agree on something for it to count. And also language is always changing in flux, so there are all these things to control for. But I am going to present to you, if give me one, I do hope I have it here. Yes, McCloskey on questions. Yes, okay. And McCloskey is not the only one. There's a dissertation by Henry on which I think he bases it. But the data he gives actually are for, so usually when such issues come up, people say, if you just look at intuitions, that's too random, one person has this, if it, whatever is random, fine, then they look at corpus, right? And they say, okay, now this is real. I'm not going to necessarily say whether, I think if you do intuition, not the way I did in 5 minutes, looking up something, I would never push that as the way to do linguistics. But if you really spend time thinking about it, checking with people, I think you're usually on track on something. But in any case, here's some stuff that should qualify. So I'm reading from a book by Rodney Doyle, which I haven't read, The Woman Who Walked into Doors. I wondered, would I be offered the same plate for the whole holiday? This is from there. I wondered, would the place always look like an abandoned building site? So all of these are direct question syntax in indirect questions. I wondered, was he illiterate? I asked Jack, was she in his class? I'm sure, okay, now we go to someone called John McCarran, that they may face the rising sun. I'm sure she wasn't far from the truth when she asked, was he thinking of throwing her in? So I know I'm reading all these things fast, but these are all from print published literature. And there are many. I want to go to James Joyce because I assume we've either read, heard of, or whatever. So here's from James Joyce, Dubliners. Yeah. The baritone was asked, what did he think of Mrs. Kearney's conduct? Joe was nearly getting cross over it and asked, how did they expect Maria to crack nuts without a nutcracker? Both of these are from James Joyce, etc. So you get the point that it is there in the literature, even written literature, but of course these are probably more conversational styles. However, his point is that if you take, these are all good with ask and wonder type of predicates. Yes, Praveen.
They seem pretty okay to me.
Mhm.
is what if it were the case, because you find these novelists writing in different ways. You would find them writing without any punctuations whatsoever.
True. Mhm.
No full stop, no comma, nothing. So when you all the sentences that you just spoke, if I were a normal listener, I would simply think that there was perhaps, I wondered,
Quotation.
something like that.
So now again, I won't spend time reading it. Quotation, it's very important that we know that this is not quotation. And the way to know that the one that I am better at spotting is in lexicals. This is English. English I in quotation refers to the subject, right? If the quotation is X said, not if it's X heard, but let's say X said. But if it is not quotation, then I will refer to the speaker, and she will refer to the subject, or he, whatever may be the case. Also, if there's a quantifier, everyone, and the he, she is bound by that quantifier, then you know it's not quotation. So all of those things are controlled for. Let me see, yeah, this one, 3A, everyone is wondering, should he leave? Again, the actual example which he says, if I can, let me see if this is searchable. Winifred. Okay, this is not searchable, but anyway, there's an example that said everyone is wondering whether she should something or the other, and that she was with everyone, bound by everyone, which was a naturally occurring sentence according to McCloskey. But we can think about how far to take this dialect seriously, okay? But for the moment, let's take it at face value, and what I'll show you is that, well, first of all, we see it somewhat replicated in this paradigm that is totally unrelated. Also, when we look at polar kya, so Rajesh did a corpus search. So we had certain data which hadn't looked at these sorts of variations. And when Rajesh did a corpus search, he said, well, look at all these cases that are, but then those were exactly the kinds of cases that McCloskey's diagnostic had separated out. So I think there's something to it, more than we have recognized in the past. And so it's instructive to look that way, look at it from that perspective. So everybody moderately okay? What about the other doubting Thomases? Praveen was the spokesman for your group. Do you feel somewhat willing to take it at face value for now and reserve judgment for later? They're looking at each other. Okay. Well, we are researchers. We are free to take issue with something someone else has presented on the empirical generalization as well as on the explanation. So you will have your chance. Okay. So assuming that this is correct and you've all removed that only predicates. So the basic generalization is that only plus WH, the predicates that only take plus WH are the ones that allow for this kind of root phenomena. And McCloskey does two things. I think in his own paper, it's not entirely clear whether he shifts course, abandons the first, or whether he still sticks to that analysis and says why this should be is a pragmatic explanation. So he says when you have words, predicates that take only plus WH, those are predicates that can take a more complex structure. Let's say, and he refers to Krivka, which we probably will not read in detail, just given the time, is the speech act phrase or the force P in Ritzi's terms. And he says, I will adopt the semantics in Krivka's work. And so we can look at that. Let's see to what extent we do. And the idea is that whether that speech act phrase can be licensed or not is pragmatic. I think that's sort of the essence of his account that I have, that I think in the end that's what he's saying. Because when you read the paper, at one point it feels like he's abandoning this idea that you get complex. No, so the way he pitches it first is to say that predicates that can take minus WH don't take the speech act phrase. But I think in the end what it amounts to is saying anything can take either kind of either kind of predicate can take either the speech act phrase or the CP phrase. But it's the pragmatics and semantics that decides whether that speech act phrase can be interpreted or not. Okay? So I should go back and read it again to see whether I'm putting words in his mouth or whether I'm actually understanding it correctly. Okay. So here's what we said. So page 2 is where we stopped yesterday. And the point was that if you take remember or know, what goes wrong if you have this structure? And let's say this is a speech act phrase or force phrase, whatever you prefer. This is the CP. And this is no. Or remember, let's stick with his. Was Henry a communist, right? So this is bad. But if it is not remember, this is good. And it is also good if you have do you, so acute do a Q morpheme, so to say, if the matrix is, so that's, and so to this he says the necessary discriminatory work is done by ultimately pragmatic conditions. We do not want to hardwire it into the lexical entry of these predicates, a constraint that forbids it from combining with a complement of this higher type. So here's a suggestion about what I think that constraint might be, the pragmatic constraint might be. So suppose the pragmatic constraint is the following. This denotes a question, right? So the subject, I'm assuming that it's Q to the subject of the matrix clause not the speaker, but the subject of the matrix clause must not know answer Q. Suppose we have this as the basic. So when it's sort of saying, here's a matrix question in embedded position. That, cannot be, I was going to use Gunnlaugson's terms. This is what I had earlier. Then I thought, since we've looked at Gunnlaugson, let me try to put it in Gunnlaugson's terms. So the subject of the matrix clause cannot be the source of answer Q. So if it's like a matrix question in embedded position, an embedded position, embedded clause that is Q to the subject of the matrix clause. in order to license that question, to make it real, to make it discourse prominent, to make it at issue, however you want to put it, the only condition is that the subject cannot be the source of the answer that you're seeking for the question. So now, this is, what was it? I remember, right? Or whatever. I remember, was Henry a communist? So the question is, was Henry a communist? The answer is, he was or he wasn't. And once you put that answer, then I remember, etc., then you're saying I is the source, right? Whoever is the subject. So we see why this could go wrong. If you say, I don't remember, then you're declaring that you're not the source. So that's a way of making it okay. Now notice that here the subject is you, because of course it's a matrix question. And now you're asking a question because you don't know the answer, or you're not that, maybe, you can go back and look at Gunnlaugsson and decide whether this should be the sole source, which would answer some of what you were objecting to. Is it that I know and I'm asking, or so you're really checking whether the addressee is the source. But that means you don't know for sure whether the addressee is or isn't, right? Because you're putting it in a yes/no question. So this is one way in which I think McCloskey's intuition can be made a little more precise. Instead of saying it's pragmatic, or thinking of pragmatic considerations as something that's doesn't have the force of some prediction. I think if we use Gunnlaugsson's idea of source and sole source to kind of make it a little more precise. Now this is a limited paradigm, but I think it does apply to this. So again, this is not something necessarily that's at the level of an explanation per se at this point, but it's a way of thinking about McCloskey's general idea and casting it in terms that could be falsifiable, right? Because that's an explanation is something that makes some predictions that can be shown to be wrong. So that's where we are at with this. Can I erase this? Okay, so this was partly, this was the paper. McCloskey's paper was something that prompted Jane Grimshaw and me to work on subordination. So what I'm reporting now is from an earlier work. What I just said, this is more recent, in my more recent thinking. But we had looked at these kinds of clauses, and there are some other references. A lot of people are in a way, this idea that embedding is not a given. Even embedded clauses can be like matrix clauses, is an old idea. I think it goes back to Hooper and Thompson. But people are looking at it now in slightly different ways, given how we think about how discourse works. Okay? Yes?
What sort of ramifications would this have in terms of subordinate scope taking, where subject of inversion is something that
Is ruled.
To check in German especially.
Right. So I think this is what Renuka also brought up either in class or at whatever point. And so the idea is, when I presented scope marking, I said there are two types. One is where you have a distinct two different questions under some kind of intonational contour, and each of them has main clause syntax. And German is a language that also has subordinated scope marking. And in fact, subordinated scope marking has the classical subordinated syntax. Furthermore, English was always thought not to have scope marking because we were looking at those structures. So I think the question can be asked, now that we think about scope of subordination as allowing main clause syntax in however limited a domain, maybe that's what we have in scope marking, and therefore things should be we reopen the discussion, right? So in this context, so the idea is, let's say we have this, we have we, and now I'm doing German, Hindi, etc. So let's put the object before the verb, but in English it would be reversed, doesn't matter. You have what, and this is the, instead of having a CP complement, which we know is not acceptable in English or in sequential scope marking, what you really have is an speech act phrase, force phrase, I'm mixing up the two, but whatever, a more complex structure. And now you could have a WH here that does inversion or whatever. I mean, this would be the verb, inversion, you have a WH that, then you can re-ask this question, is this direct dependency or indirect dependency? I don't think it settles the question one way or the other, but certainly it opens up a way of thinking about sequential scope marking that is also embedded. And so here this is going to be what is crucial, which is that if you have everyone here, this is a fact that is very clearly comes out in German, which has both of them. So there's everyone, blah, blah, blah. And now you move the, let's say, where did, or whatever is the equivalent in German. I'm kind of mixing up my languages, but think of it as for, pseudo-German or quasi-German. Anyway, everyone what thinks, where should she, he go? So this should be possible, whether it is in C, whether this, so the issue is whether this, so on this view, subordinated scope marking lacks this structure, sequential scope marking has this structure. But then the relationship of the CP in terms of C command is not affected. So we don't know why this is unacceptable when it's a speech act phrase, and this is acceptable when it's a CP. Because pronominal binding is not affected by locality. So that would be the challenge for those. So on the indirect dependency view, it doesn't matter what you do here. This is really a part of this phrase, right? It's really not a complement of V. And so there are things that we could, in the subordinated case. In the sequential case, it's just two separate. So another thing that I noticed in the presentations, in some of the languages, you use prosody to really make that distinction, right? If it was strong pause, then you said that it's sequential. If there was just a very light pause or maybe no pause, then you said it's subordinate. But this would be what I would look at. This, and there are other, the comparative case. But that is actually the same for both. So that doesn't really help us decide, I guess. But anything that, and then the other thing might be the context that I used. But again, that one could argue it has to do with the function of speech act phrase. So I think the variable binding is going to be important for that. But I think it certainly opens up a different way of looking at it. Because the other point, I'll just say this and then we can move on. Notice that these things are only good with wonder, whereas this is think. However, you could say that this what plays some role in, just like negation, what can make that difference. But remember that negation does not, right? Yeah, which is
clearly catch the point. Which binding of the pronominal is not available in subordinated?
So subordinated is okay. So everyone can bind the pronoun in the subordinated case. It cannot bind the pronoun in the sequential case. So if you are going to merge the sequential into this, the C command relation is the same between them then, right? So it becomes a little bit harder to push that line. but I think it's something that is open to. But the other thing would be, then you have to really think: can I make this into an? Why doesn't it work with negation? These are all things that the person who doesn't believe in direct dependency will question you on. But you should have the courage of your convictions and go with whatever you think is right, given this possibility. Maybe as a homework assignment, you should just try it out. Not for this class, when you go back home. Is it clear, Jasvi, what the issue is with this? Can I raise this? Any other question before we try and see what the substance of the Dayal and Grimshaw ideas? It wasn't it's not a published paper. It was really like a draft of what we had been looking at, and we just put it in because we thought, at least let's write it down, or we would have even forgotten it by now, right? So. Okay, so let's take a break from scope marking and remember that we are now looking at subordination. And if you want the general theme, it's really, can we just look at a verb and decide what kind of complement it takes? You can think of it that way. Does the verb by itself tell you what the status of the complement is, syntactic or semantic? Or pragmatic, or does the verb, or is it the whole structure, verb plus whatever else it comes wrapped with? So another way to think of it is, you can do whatever you want as long as the meanings all add up and everything is good, the structure is good. So there's no actual selection. So just to give a little bit of a historical background, the original way of thinking about complementation was in terms of plus minus WH. That's what we still use in some way. And I think we should continue to use because it's a useful first cut. Grimshaw 79 brought up the need for a more fine-grained distinction. And she was looking at WH structures that were not just questions but also exclamatives. So in English, you have WH movement with WH exclamatives like, what wonderful food we had last night, right? That's not a question. I'm not asking anybody anything. I'm just informing you. But it was more than, I could have said we had good food last night. But this is to say it was good to a high degree, right? What good food that was. So her point was that's WH movement. Should that satisfy the plus minus? Can I erase this? I say that and I erase it without looking to see if anyone will stop me. Okay. So take two structures that both have WH movement. What good food? So usually it has some kind of gradable adjective. What good food we ate. But this is, her point was that this is a plus WH construction. And this is a WH construction too. What food or which food did you eat? What food did you eat, or what we ate? I could ask. I suppose to keep it minimally, I could say, what food did we eat last night? I could ask you that, right? I forgot the name, let's say. And if you look at these two cases, you'll see they're both plus WH. But the verbs that take one or the other are not the same. So, for example, if you take one, she asked, or wondered, and you say these words are plus WH selecting. This is good. She wondered what food we ate. Fix your syntax, let's say. She wondered what food we ate yesterday. Fine. She wondered what good food we ate yesterday is not fine. So if you have another way to test the difference is what a good meal we had yesterday. You can't question with what something, right? So if it's what good food or what a meal we had yesterday, these are exclamatives. And you don't ask exclamatives. So her point was, in addition to the two kinds of selection, there's C selection, that's category. I take CPs, I take DPs, etc. We won't go into that. But there's also semantic selection. And when you talk about semantic selection, then you can say, ask and wonder, take questions. That's semantic selection. This is a WHCP that translates into a question. This is a WHCP that does not translate into a question. Rather, you can say it translates into some kind of, there's a factivity about this, right? We know that we ate a good meal, and we're expressing that it was good to a high degree, roughly speaking. It's not a question by me. I totally remember what we ate, right? I can name it. I'm just telling you that it was good to a high, to a high degree. So her point was, this is semantic selection. It's not syntactic. They're both CPs, we went into this SAP and all at that point. So, but if you read, so every word comes saying, I'll take semantically, I'll take this, syntactically, I'll take that. But the kind of data we are now looking at, even semantically, the question, let's say it's a question, things seem to change, right? Or not a question, what we were looking at. It's the form of the question, direct question versus indirect question. But whether it's good or bad gets determined not at the level of V, where you merge V and the CP. It gets determined higher up. But if you read her account of semantic selection, actually I think she anticipates this. Because what she says in explanation, why does she say this is bad? Because wonder and ask, in her terms, are the lexical meanings of these verbs express ignorance about the content of the. So that's fine here. What food did we eat? There are two possibilities at least that we are not, the person who is wondering or asking is not sure of. But in this case, the meaning of an exclamative it has factivity in her terms, and that's what other people have also talked about factivity. So it says, we ate food, it was good to a high degree. None of it has any indeterminacy. And so in a way she sets the stage for saying, what does semantic selection mean? It simply means compatibility with the meanings of the different pieces. It doesn't have to stop at the verb, it can be the whole structure. So I think this was really, I think reading this paper from the perspective of what we saw, starting with McCloskey's work, really made me think of semantic selection very differently. But it's totally logically what it predicts, what it entails. And in fact, there's a body of literature that tries to get other unexpected paradigms, for example, which also she and some literature around then had noticed. Take like surprise, be surprised. Questions at this point, before I bring up the new point? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So how do we know we are dealing with exclamative versus a question, roughly? It may differ from language to language, but for English, we have inversion. That's one test. So even if we have what good food we ate, there's no inversion in an exclamative. There's inversion in a question. The second thing is that you can't ask a question with a in it. What an artist he is. You can exclaim, but you can't say what an artist is he. It doesn't mean, is he an artist of the, as a actor, or is he a painter? You can't make sense of it, right? So I don't know if anyone has done a compositional analysis of why an indefinite is fine there. We are just using it as a diagnostic for saying that's an exclamative. So an exclamative can be distinguished from an interrogative in English on the basis of two things: subject-object inversion in the question, but not in exclamative, and the possibility of having a full indefinite noun phrase in the exclamative, but not in the interrogative. Does that? And also there are other restrictions, like you can't have which in an exclamative. So you can't say, oh, which book it is, meaning, oh, you just can't do it. Which good book it is. It is. You can say, which good book is it that I should read, or something. So a question is fine with which, but not with exclamative. So with these sorts of paradigms, one is just recognizing that this is a fact about a language and using it as a diagnostic. The other is trying to derive it. So I'm not trying to derive it here. I'm simply saying, if you have this difference, and if you think about the meanings of verbs, then you can see why this would not go with this. I think her term was, this has a factivity that is antithetical to the meaning of predicates that obligatorily take questions. So that's kind of interesting. I was going to tell you another paradigm. Yes, so just
The fact that we can't have which, isn't it a bit counterintuitive if we think in terms of delinking? Because what n versus which n in an exclamative? If it's an exclamative,
Okay.
it is a discourse linked scenario we are talking
Yeah. So I think delinking, from my perspective, should be taken as a term that has these correlations. Should not be taken as everything that is delinked, therefore should be thought about in the same terms. So you're saying this, if it is fractive, then we're talking about a meal that was actually there. That's sort of delinked, but it's just a term that you don't want to apply to this and you don't want to derive which, because I don't even know if in Hindi there's a difference between, does every language have a which versus a what? The other thing is, this is only about, you can do, what are the other WHs that you can use here? How is good? What? Where? Can you do where? What a wonderful place we saw. But where we went is hard to make into an exclamative. So again, there hasn't been as much work on exclamatives as there has been on questions. But in Hindi, don't we use kitna for a lot of them? It's like how much? Kitna badhiya tha, or kitni achhi hai, kitna tita hai, or anything, right? It's a lot of it is kitna. You can say kya badhiya play dekha. Kya is good, kitna is good, whereas I think you wouldn't use how much, right? Unless it really was amount, right? How much food there was. Yeah, so it's really about amounts, but like when we were saying kitna acha tha, we wouldn't use how much. You could say how good. So again, diagnostics, not when you're trying to derive them, but if you're using them just as diagnostics, then it's sort of a little bit language specific. And this is something you guys are seeing also when you're doing delinking in these languages. We're not sure, is it really even mapping into the category, whether you call it neat or not neat. But let's say there's 3.5 categories or 4 categories in English. There's the inherently dealing, there's the aggressively non-dealing, And then there's the middle one, which has maybe some shading. And I don't know what we'll find out tomorrow morning, but I'm guessing that it's not going to be that straightforward, right? So no, these diagnostics are really for English and English-like languages. But however you make so the explanation though about the matching, so maybe let me stop and see. Are there questions? Oh, okay. So we're already doing up. Okay, fine. But but the explanation should carry over. If the explanation is really about lexical meanings of these verbs, not matching up with the meaning of an exclamative. So let's say in Hindi we use kitna more freely for exclamatives. And let's say we have puchna, which is closest to ask. Then it shouldn't be possible to say उसने पूछा कितना बढ़िया था, right? It's the same mismatch. You can say उसने पूछा कितना बढ़िया था, as in, was it that good, or this, what was the level of goodness? But you can't exclaim. So the explanation should carry over, but not the details of whether something is or is not an exclamative. Any other question? I'm going to throw out another teaser. I really am not going to discuss it. You can look in my book for possible leads. But here's another thing that she used to argue for S selection and C selection. This was Jane was surprised. I don't know if this was exactly the predicate she used, but anyway, this would fit. Jane was surprised whether Mary left. This is bad, right? Or even some people want to add at. It's bad. But Jane was surprised at who left is good. And this is an open question, because everything we've been saying so far is that polar questions and WH questions are the same sorts of object. They denote sets of propositions, not single propositions as declaratives do. So surprise can take, Jane was surprised that Mary left is fine. Whether Mary left is not fine. At who left is fine. So her point was, don't just say plus WH selecting predicates. There's more going on here. Okay? Not going to discuss this. Yes, Rikar.
But why do we need two kinds of selection if we can say semantically?
Okay.
Here you say whether is like the whole world has only two answers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why surprise doesn't work.
Why?
I mean, because
You're surprised at one of those two words. You don't know which one.
yeah, so exactly, because you don't know. But the who is already restricting your set. But my question is this: why do you need two kinds of?
Yeah. Your question is actually different. Here you want to give that explanation, right? It has to do with only two alternatives. It's very tempting. But suppose I set up the scenario in such a way that there are two contestants in this game, and only one of them can win. And I was surprised at who won. So I take your point. And in fact, people have tried. It's a particular, but that comes very close. Like if A wins, B can't win, because this is one, it's one winner, we are choosing between two. It's a very challenging problem, which is why I'm not bringing it up, because if I had a nice simple solution, you bet I would have brought it up, right? Because I would have the confidence that I can present it in 15 minutes, answer the questions I can answer in 10 minutes, and shut up the ones I can't answer in another 5 minutes. Boom, done, 45 minutes. It's, in my view, there are very good ideas out there about how to capture this. One of them along the lines that you're saying, like they're either A or B, not both. But I told you what the challenge for that view is. Still, something there. But your other question is, okay, then let's just go with semantic selection. Why do we need C selection, category selection? And that has to do with the what are called concealed questions. Is this a familiar term? Good. Okay. Oh, perfect timing. Okay. So now, let me think. Yeah. Here's a sentence. Does it have an embedded question? Mary knows the capital of Italy. There's no WH complement, right, to the verb know. Okay, good. What is this? Looks like a DP, right? What does it mean? Mary knows the capital of Italy? What the capital is. So it's an identity question, one reading. So Mary knows capital of Italy is, and now we'll range over Rome, Milan, etc., all whatever other cities you think are likely candidates. There's another meaning, which is, I know Mumbai, I know Rome, I've been there, I know how to get from point A to, that's the acquaintance reading. So, no takes two readings. Actually, in Hindi, they're two different. Malum only takes this reading, right? Mujhe, Italy ka capital, malum hai means Rome. I can answer that question. It doesn't mean that I know how to make my way around Rome. Uske liye we have to, main Rome अच्छी तरह जानती हूँ, right? So you can have a language that distinguishes between one or the other, and so this is one thing. Deep. So this is, we can say this selects DPs that are questions. There's another verb. Let's say, let me think. I wondered the capital of Italy is not good. You can say, I wondered what the capital of Italy is, but you can't say, I wondered the capital of Italy. So, no, C selects DP, wonder, C selects CP, not DP. I mean, no also selects CP. So, the idea is C selection, no and wonder both take CPs, but only no takes DP. That's category. S selection, they both take questions. So, since it can take DP, it can take a DP that can have the meaning of question. So that's the reason for having a two-pronged selection. But what we were discussing today is that even that we don't want to hardwire into into use McCloskey's terms. You really just want to allow everything to go up, and let's see where the semantics pragmatics fall at the end of the day. If it all works out, there's no incompatibility, it's good. If there is, then there isn't, then it crashes. And what I wrote earlier about the subject being the source is a way of sort of making precise what it means to say that everything, what is the relationship of the pragmatic relationship between the subject and the embedded question would have to be. Okay, so any questions? Shall we do a little bit? Ringu, you have a question? No? Anybody else? Okay, so let's move on till we are called to tea. Yeah, is that okay? Okay, so this was our idea. This is okay. So the idea was the following. You can have an embedded clause, and you decide whether it's subordinate or not based on the syntax, where we use both one inversion is one thing, but pronominal binding, sequence of tense, etc. was the other. Okay. when it is subordinate, you can ask yourself, what is the force of that full sentence? Matrix plus its subordinate clause, okay? And the baseline is, if it's a declarative, you are making a statement. You're not eliciting a question. That's the baseline view. If it's a interrogative, then you're asking a question. And now we'll look at some cases where the matrix is not the one that determines what speech act you're engaging in. So, in addition to speaker and hearer or addressee, we have this idea of a source, which may or may not be exactly what Gunnlaugsson had, because this is sort of written at a time when we hadn't looked closely at Gunnlaugsson. Maybe it had just come out, or also when you publish in 2009, you probably were working on it in 2006 and 7. So whatever it is, this source may or not be exactly what Gunnlaugsson has, but okay. But the idea that I think I still am holding on to, and that I kind of alluded to there, was that the speaker is not, if it's a subordinate clause, that's not a quotation. Then the speaker is not going to be the one related to the subordinate clause. It's the subject in whatever relationship the verb gives, okay? And then we have this idea of of something called quasi-subordination. And there's a little bit of, okay, let me just present it. Quasi-subordination means that syntactically it may be subordinated, but in terms of pragmatics, in terms of the discourse, it carries the main force of the argument, okay? So let me illustrate with the declarative. Suppose you say, 8A, that's a simple clause, it will rain tonight. That's an assertion. The speaker is making the assertion. You can, fill in Gunnlaugsson or Krivka or Stolniker, whatever, that the speaker is somehow committed to the truth of that proposition, has enough basis to say, look, this is why I think so. The second one has nothing to do with raining, directly speaking, right? Susan believes that it will rain tonight. It's about Susan's thoughts and beliefs, okay? And the question we'll ask is, to what extent will the proposition, it will rain tonight, be something that changes the discourse? So suppose I say it will rain tonight. Before this, you had no views about the weather. You weren't thinking about it. I say it, you accept it, then you also believe that it will rain tonight, right? It's part of whether it will or not, doesn't matter. That's what we've accepted. Okay, so if we look, we got these nice pictures done. I think someone helped us with that. So this is the idea. If you look at the first context, that's where it's open, right? The world could be one where it will rain, you need your umbrella, or it will be, well, tonight I don't know that the sun will be shining, but the moon or whatever. So I think this is just it. It is raining. Let's say, yeah, that's what it is. It is raining. If I say it is raining, before I utter this, make this assertion, both options are open. I make the assertion, you accept the answer, so speaker. So we have three things here: speaker, hearer. In a simple clause, there's the source doesn't really, the source and the speaker are the same. So the context changes, and you rule out all the worlds in which that proposition is false. You're just left with your umbrella, right? Okay. Now, in the second case, we have Susan believes that it is raining, or he believes whatever that, I can't read this. Bill, yeah, Bill. Okay. So Bill is the source of the thing, and where would we have this kind of a reading? We could say, what is, Bill has, I'm going to tell you Bill's views on, he's planning to do this. He wants to have a party, but he believes that it will rain tonight. So it was an outdoor party. He's going to move it indoors. It could be any scenario that you could think about where it's about Bill and what he thinks, what he believes. And in that case, our worldview need not change, right? We can still be open to the idea that it will rain or it is raining or it's not raining. I don't know why I keep going between tonight and right now. Why is Bill taking his umbrella with him? He believes it is raining outside, so he's carrying his umbrella. So that's the source can have that belief, but the rest of us need not, because this is a non-factive verb. Embedded, done. But the other cases where Bill is some kind of authority. Let's say he's the one who keeps, you must have someone in your group who's very good at, they always read the weather forecast, listen to the weather forecast or whatever, or look out of the window before they step out of the building, whatever. And in that case, if I'm asking you, well, do you think it's raining? You say, well, Bill says it's raining. And Bill should know. So to the extent that that source is a recognized authority, you can answer my direct question, is it raining? Either explicit or implicit, with Bill says it's raining and Bill knows. Now, in that case, you notice that the embedded clause is having the same effect on the context as the simple statement, it is raining. It's just that it's not directly, it's not that the speaker says, I believe this, or the speaker actually in fact, so it really is contingent on the authority invested in the subject it's a pragmatic thing. So you'll hear, well, mom says you can't do this. Little kids fighting. No, dad said I could do it, i.e., I can do it, right? So you never say my silly little brother said I could do it and expect to have the same effect, right? So the idea is that this is the pragmatic part of it. But grammatically, it is what it is. It is subordination. This is a subordinate clause that is either an assertion or a question, and it's hooked up to the subject of the predicate. Okay, so let me see if there was anything. Yeah. Oh, the other thing, so there are people here who always ask, what if I know and then I'm still asking the question? I think the speaker, if the context is right, the speaker need not be actually asking that, be totally ignorant, but it may still have that, yeah. Will it rain tonight? So this was the assertion part, now this is the question part. I can ask the question, will it rain tonight? Right? Direct question. I don't know the answer maybe, and I want to know the answer. I think you have the answer. The other thing is, when you could embed the question. Susan is wondering if it will rain tonight. Now, do you want to answer the question? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It all depends. So if you, I think we spelled out a scenario where if you are wondering about, why is Bill so preoccupied? Why isn't he participating in a conversation? Or why is Sue not participating? Well, she's wondering, she's preoccupied because she's wondering if it will rain tonight. None of us would give an answer in that case. But if you are Susan's secretary and, if Susan's secretary comes out to you and you're at the computer and she says, Susan's wondering if it will rain tonight, and you also kind of there in the hierarchy, you will go to weather.com and say yes or no. You will answer the question because the pragmatics of the situation is such where Susan's desire to know is all important, has a certain priority in the discourse. So the point of all this is to say that things may be syntactically subordinate, but pragmatically the main point. And again, this is not something that is completely unique to our position. There's a lot of work being done on this, and in fact, it has some antecedents in, as I mentioned earlier, in the Hooper and Thompson paper. There's a slight difference in the way in which it is, in the way in which we connect the dots, and there always is, like the take is a little bit different. I think for Hooper and Thompson, they say embedded clauses can be assertions. but that's not exactly how we are pitching it, but same difference, something, it has the same, we're looking at the same kinds of phenomena and trying to explain it with the same building blocks or slightly different building blocks maybe. And then we have this data, which again now I'm a little bit unsure based on our discussion the other day. So the first one is, these have, remember we looked at clear, it is clear that she is a good linguist, and you could answer with yes she is or yes it is. So either the main clause, clarity, it is clear or not clear, or it is clear that she is or she isn't. So this is a little bit, now I'm not sure, you can look at, so it will rain tonight. No, it won't. Susan believes that it will rain tonight. In the normal course, that we won't say no, it won't, but again, Susan believes that it will rain tonight. You can answer it, probably you have to say, well, I don't think it will. I don't know that you can just say, no, it won't. In the example that I had given yesterday, it was easier to just challenge the embedded clause, but that also had, there was no individual, it was that expletive, it is clear. So I don't know to what extent that makes the embedded clause more transparent. And will it rain tonight? You can give a direct answer, yes. Susan is wondering if it will rain tonight. You really can't give an answer, yes. Yeah, this is very clear, because that's not, either you interpret it as a question about the embedded clause and then you say, yes, I believe it will, or you interpret it as a declarative, and then yes is not the standard response to an assertion. You can agree, yes, I agree with you, she is wondering, but you see that there are ways of kind of, even though they may end up having the same effect on discourse, there may still be the effect of syntax in how the at issue, not at issue pieces of a structure present themselves for the responses. It should be, we can stop here and take questions. Yes, Praveen?
When you said, is there a possibility of the third person getting into the discourse, even though the third person is a silent individual? Because in that case, I think 10B for me could be, a possible way to react. And instead, supposing A and B were talking to each other about whether it would rain or not, and one of them is Susan. And then I step in, and this person tells me.
Wait, one of us is Susan? No.
A and B, so either A or B is Susan. This third person C. Susan, A and B, that is B is Susan. They're talking to each other whether it would rain or not. And then A tells C. C steps in and asks, okay, what's happening? Susan said, or Susan believes that it will rain tonight.
And now, okay,
This
yeah.
person can say, no, it won't. I checked it with the...
Yeah. So Susan is one of the players. It's probably easier with that, right? To get this. Again, so it's not a claim that it will or it won't, or maybe it was pitched that way, I don't remember. My current understanding is that a straightforward yes and no is a straightforward response to the main clause predicts certain things. But to the extent that something can be discourse active, you can respond. I don't know. You're saying you can do it just directly. It won't.
In this particular context that I set up.
Yeah. I think I see why it is okay, but Susan has to be one of them, it seems, right? And
yes.
there seems to be some, yeah. Yeah.
Somewhat sort of directing your note to directly to Susan, which is why the direct really.
In fact, now let me give you pitch another context. Forget about Susan being there here.
Okay.
These two people, A and B, are talking about what is it that Susan believes. And when the C steps in and says, okay, what's going on with you two, right? And they say, we're discussing whether it would rain and all. And Susan believes that.
So you are making it very clear that under discussion is whether it will rain or not. And you're bringing in Susan believes, and then it's possible. Yeah, maybe I would get it.
So the reason
Yeah.
why I said I want to ask you this, or I need the clarification conversation was we were talking about, when we picked Gun Loksen's terms,
Mhm.
commitment, source, etc. So here the source is not readily there, physically.
Mhm,
It
mhm.
could be a source that's just outside. It just
Yeah.
happens to be the case that I invest my faith in that particular source.
Right,
And
yes.
still things can be worked out. I mean,
Mhm.
the richer that you make a particular context,
The more chances of the subordinate clause becoming discourse active. Yes, absolutely right. And that means these tests are not hard and fast. And I think we didn't. I think that clearly, and it is clear one. There's no way, or maybe you can. The point is that the syntax is not to be ignored. It may be overridden to some extent, how rich you make the context and how much you make it possible for the embedded clause to be considered on its own, right? That was sort of what I think your rich context was like, what's under debate is it or is it not? And in that case, then you could perhaps still answer. So again, all of this is not a way of saying that, it can never be the case that you could target the embedded clause, but you can create a context, make it an existential statement. In a context of a particular kind, you will get a difference, depending on, so, which would show that even when something is discourse active, or it may not be directly targetable, something like that. But the general point is that you can have subordination going along with a syntactic root phenomena like inversion, but notice that these are not inverted, right? These are real subordinate clauses. So my current understanding is that to be discourse active, you don't have to have main clause syntax. So earlier when we said Susan wants